Hello crypto friends. In today's video, we're going to be discussing about Bitcoin's current price action. We're seeing really good momentum this morning, but also something else I want to talk about is, will Bitcoin ever go back towards $5,000 price range? All right, I know that seems like an impossibility, but hear me out guys. So we'll get into that right here, right now. All right, guys. So let's talk about Bitcoin's current price action before we get into the other discussion. And let's talk about it, how today we're seeing a pretty good reaction again off that $9,500 range. If you watched my previous video, this is what I discussed about how Bitcoin would end up reacting off its previous weekly support. Where I'm looking to see a lot of support would be in this general area, which is around that $9,500 range. The reason I say that is because that is where we lastly had topped out. But since we did get a break above that, this is going to enact as our support structure. You can see that we have had a nice reaction so far off these levels. So what does that mean for Bitcoin? Currently, for me, what this means is that we are, in my opinion, at a really good support structure, or at a support level, right? I do suspect that Bitcoin could end up pushing up a little bit further, possibly end up retesting this area a couple of times to get what's known as a consolidation, right? So possibly a symmetrical wedge of some sorts like this. And then eventually we could end up breaking towards the upside, all right? I think that if at this point, after we get some nice accumulation, Bitcoin could end up breaking above possibly, again, that 10,500 range. And we end up making some possibly some higher highs at this point, right? My next target, if we were to break above this level, would possibly be around $12,000, right? Let me quickly get into some other altcoins before we get into our discussion for the day. And that is also, of course, Ethereum. Ethereum's also seeing even better price action in comparison to that of Bitcoin. You can see that after we had a couple of retests towards the downside, that we did end up getting a nice 18% reaction off this support structure, right? So again, that support structure comes from its previous weekly support around this general vicinity, right, of around 230, 240 range. And you can see that this is enacting as a really strong support. Similarly, what I had discussed about with Bitcoin was that I do suspect that eventually we could end up seeing a possible retest towards the downside, maybe getting some consolidation off this general area, and then we end up moving towards the upside and continuing to uptrend, right? We are still in a very good uptrend, guys, so worry not, right? From a micro perspective, we're still in a really good standing. So like I said before, if anything changes, I will update you guys. So make sure to subscribe, like the videos, and as always, hit that notification bell so you guys can stay alerted for the next updates. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, right, things are still looking pretty good overall in the markets. Nothing to worry about from a macro perspective. I'm sorry, a micro perspective. Hell, even a macro perspective, right? Things are still looking overall really, really solid. We are still trending above all major EMAs. You can see that we still are holding above that 18 and 26 EMA support. We're still holding above, of course, that 200 exponential moving average, right? So if you guys want to, you can technically click off the video right now and just ignore what I'm about to say, because what I'm about to say might sound really, really crazy. So here we go. Let's get right into it. So I already know I'm probably going to get a couple of dislikes just from this chart alone, but hear me out, guys. All right, so first of all, let me just clarify that this right here is just a scenario, all right? Everything what I'm about to say right now is hypothetical and is not going to happen until it happens, right? And as right now, like I said before, this is all hypothetical, and I'm gonna explain everything what I'm about to say. Okay, so first let me bring up a chart that I'm about to bring up, and let me explain what the current market of Bitcoin is. A lot of people are under the assumption that Bitcoin is in a bull market. And let me tell you right now, guys, we are still technically not in a bull market. Yes, we are uptrending, and yes, we're doing quite phenomenal, but we're not in a bull market just yet. A bull market essentially is when we break all previous all-time highs, right? That's essentially what a bull market is. A bear market is when we fail to break previous all-time highs and we are just making constant lower lows, right? So something of this nature like this. And then of course, the last one is what's known as a range, right? Where we fail to break all-time highs, but also fail to break lower lows, right? So we're technically just ranging like this, right? And that's essentially what consolidation is, right? Where we're just kind of tightening up into this like tight little triangular, and we're just kind of tightening up like that. And that's what's known as a range or consolidation, whatever you would like to call it. And as you guys can see right now, Bitcoin is in that right now. We're still technically what's known as a range, right? We still haven't broken above previous all-time highs, which is of course, where's the little price label, right? So its all-time highs is technically around 20,000, which we haven't broken just yet. We also haven't broken above its previous all-time highs, which was around 14,000, or at least really, really close to it. And as we stand, Bitcoin is roughly around that 9,900 range. Let's even get out around $10,000, right? Of course. And so for us to still technically be within that range, I think, you know, Bitcoin could get well above $12,000, right? We could still technically consolidate here and push up to $12,000, and we would still be within that range. All right. So even if Bitcoin pushes up to $12,000, we're still technically not in a bull market. All right. So in order for that to change, Bitcoin would of course have to break above $14,000, right? So we may possibly consolidating within this general area, and then we end up seeing some higher highs, retesting of course that 20,000 range. And then of course, eventually maybe gain some major resistance here, consolidating overall, and then of course uptrending at that point. I think at that point we would of course be in a full-blown bull market. That's what you would call a bull market, right? Because we broke out of its previous all-time highs. And let me tell you right now, guys, when the day comes that Bitcoin breaks 20,000, which it will, that day will come. Let me just clarify that right now. When that day comes, you know, we will be in a crazy parabolic run up, guys. Like that's when Bitcoin would go completely crazy. And that is when the altcoins will start to 10x all around. Pretty much everything you pick up is just going to turn to gold. All right. But we're not there yet, just yet. So here, let me talk about in this video why it's still possible for Bitcoin to possibly end up retracing down towards even lows of around 5,000, not necessarily 5,000 exact, but maybe perhaps $5,800, $5,500. But of course, let me clarify that right now. So if we pull up in our previous video, right, this is actually where I had talked about how altcoins will explode over 20,000%. In that video, I did bring up what's known as the log scale. And you guys can see right here in this log scale, this brings up Bitcoin's overall parabolic trend that it's had since for over 10 years, actually, right? Since actually 2009. And you can see that overall, as the market expands, you know, we tend to go into what's known as this little parabolic curve, right? And this curve has helped Bitcoin overall give us what's known as a trend. And this has enacted Bitcoin to overall help us either tell us when Bitcoin is going to top out or when Bitcoin has bottomed. In fact, this is the same chart that I utilized to help me identify when Bitcoin bottomed back when it was at $3,100. But as you guys can see right now at the current Bitcoin price, right? So in this general area right here, you guys can see that the red line is starting to approach. We are starting to come up on that blue line, that bear trend as well. You guys can see overall though, that blue line is still pointing towards downward price action, right? We're still technically within that consolidating range. So technically we haven't breaking above that just yet. And so that leads me to believe that we are still under the impression that Bitcoin could still possibly pull back here, even as high as $20,000 or $12,000. I'm sorry. And what we would have to ideally see for that to happen is that Bitcoin would of course end up retesting this level possibly twice, right? If we actually get into the daily time frame, right? Bitcoin in the past has always given us signs that it is reversing, right? So you can see that right here, we did end up getting a double top, right? And that is essentially what commenced, of course, this overall bear trend. In the past, also, Bitcoin did end up giving us a lower high, right? And that is essentially what commenced the first bear trend, right? And so in order for us to even remotely see $5,000 from this point on, Bitcoin would have to possibly, again, consolidate here, push up towards that 12,000 range, and then end up rejecting it and then end up giving us what's known as a double top possibly. And if we were to see something of that nature that represents similar to what we had back here, then at that point, then yes, it could be very possible that we could begin a downtrend, and then at that point we could end up retesting lows of around $5,000. And the reason I say $5,000 and not like $3,100 or so is because as the market expands, we continue to move upwards, right? So nothing will ever go below 3,100 in my personal opinion. So if you're looking to say, well, I think Bitcoin could go lower, that's not the case, guys. Bitcoin will never go below 3,100. In fact, it will never go, in my opinion, below even $5,000. I've said this for quite some time. So for us to, in my opinion, I think that this general support still would be a good area to look at if in the event that Bitcoin does end up double topping here, and then we end up beginning what's known as a bear trend. I think that Bitcoin at this point would still put us within that range, right? That consolidating range. And at this point, that could lead us into, of course, eventually end up breaking out of this, right? And we go into, of course, a full parabolic run up, and Bitcoin ends up making higher highs of around $100,000 or more, right? We end up going above $150,000, right? So something like crazy like that overall. So from a macro perspective, Bitcoin is still in trajectory to break all-time highs. The question is, are we going to do it right here, right now, right? Are we going to break out of its previous all-time highs right now, and we're going to go into that parabolic run-up, or are we possibly going to double top off that range and go back, deviate back towards, again, this general low before we end up uptrending once again? I know it seems like we've had nothing but extensive bear markets ever since, a lot of you guys possibly joined crypto. And I know this seems like a very big downer, but I just think that it's very important for me to bring this up because I know it's easy to get lost in the price action. All right, guys. I mean, it hasn't been, all that long ago since Bitcoin was at 6,000 range. It's only been less than like 2 months, if that, right? Bitcoin at its lows was around December 16th. And it's only been around 60 days, 2 months, right, since we've hit those lows. So what's to say that another 2 months or 3 months, Bitcoin couldn't necessarily retrace back towards those lows again, guys? So never take out anything out of the equation that Bitcoin could possibly pull back, but as long as Bitcoin is still below these higher lows, right, we still technically have that possibility. All right. So like I said before though, guys, there's nothing to worry about from a macro perspective. I do think that Bitcoin will still push up from its current price action here. I think we could end up consolidating here, and then eventually end up retesting that 12,000 range. So like I said before, I will continue to update you guys, and I always have, for the longest time. And the trend is still pointing towards, a bull trend, an uptrend. So there's nothing necessarily to worry about. And as long as we continue to uptrend overall, we're still in trajectory to break these previous all-time highs, and until the market tells us otherwise, right? Once the market says that, you know what, there's a lot of resistance here, and we begin to downtrend, then that's when I would possibly say that we could possibly end up going down towards $5,000. All right. So let me know your thoughts. Am I talking crazy here? Are we going to break all-time highs here, or possibly do we still have that possibility of going down towards $5,000, guys? This is something that I did think about, or I did bring up. This is something I did bring up, or I was thinking about overnight, guys. So there's nothing to rule out here because everything is still under the impression that we could, end up pulling back here. Like I said before, when you pull up something like the log scale, it still points us towards a possible, even more, of a bear trend than we still currently are. And I think, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for us to see $5,000 again. So this isn't to scare you guys. This is just something to bring awareness, right? So for you guys to keep an eye out for, because at any moment's notice, things could change, right? So anyways, guys, don't mean to be a downer here. Let me know your thoughts in the description below or in the comment section below. And with that being said, I'll see you guys on the next one.